Our final speaker tonight is Spike Wong. He's a local playwright and former school teacher who was born and raised in Watsonville. When Spike and I were talking ahead of this event, I was struck by how similar his experience as a second-generation Asian American immigrant was to mine as a first-generation immigrant. There's a certain dichotomy of culture that you grow up with when your family life is very different from the life you lead outside, and yet the goal is always to achieve the American dream. This year has been particularly cruel to Asian Americans because, in part, of the racist statements made during the COVID-19 pandemic. Asian American elders are being randomly attacked in the Bay Area and around the country. And there was even a mass shooting in Atlanta that targeted AAPI lives, 8 lives. For Spike, this past year has been a period of reflection, looking back into his own family history. 3 generations of his family have embraced life in America, and at various times in their life have had to reckon with the idea that maybe America hasn't embraced them. I'll let Spike tell it.
This is the mask that I stopped wearing regularly in December of 2020. This is the mask that I've worn the past several months. Anything that more readily identifies me as a Chinese American, I have stopped wearing. There have been a couple of local incidents that could have escalated, but thankfully didn't. The San Francisco Bay Area has certainly seen its share of vile and cowardly physical attacks on Asians. And there have been many anti-Asian attacks throughout the country that have ultimately caused me to retreat. And I say retreat because when I was a little kid, my grandfather would sometimes say to me, "Do not forget, you were born in the year of the dragon." I've never forgotten that because there are implied responsibilities. There's an assumed strength, power, and compassion belonging to those that are born in the year of the dragon. I should take a stronger stance. I should use a louder voice. And yet, retreat I have. Retreated from being Chinese American. Sheltering myself once again from being seen as the other. Because Asian Americans have always been the other in the history of the United States. In 1853, George Hall of California, a white man, was declared not guilty on appeal of murder because his original conviction had come about solely due to the testimony of 3 Chinese minors. In effect, the California Supreme Court ruled that testimony from Chinese, regardless of citizenship status, was inadmissible in court. Chinese were not real people. The Page Act of 1875 banned virtually all Chinese women from immigrating to the United States. Part of the expectation was to force Chinese men back to China if they wanted to have a family. It was also believed that the majority of Chinese women wishing to enter the country were prostitutes and/or women carrying diseases that would kill white men. While these events and many like them are long ago history to some, the effects of these laws and attitudes led to long-term consciousness and even acceptance of otherness among both the affected Chinese and American society in general. It's why an 85-year-old Chinese woman can be viciously stabbed from behind by a man in San Francisco. She isn't a real person. She's an other. It's why, after the random beatdown and killing of an elderly Asian man, also in San Francisco, the district attorney involved can describe the attack as, quote, some sort of temper tantrum. It's what happens to others. This classification of otherness was in full display with the passage of the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882. This law, essentially forbidding the immigration of Chinese to the United States, was only repealed in December of 1943, and mostly to appease the political immorality of being a wartime ally of a country whose people were banned from immigrating. This act was the only law ever to forbid the immigration of a particular ethnicity to the United States. I think I know why my grandfather wanted me to always remember that I was born in the year of the dragon. It wasn't a superstition. What he was doing was reminding me in his own way that he had committed the equivalent of cultural suicide by coming here, leaving one thing to become another. As an immigrant in the era of the Chinese Exclusion Act, he had survived imprisonment and interrogation on Angel Island in San Francisco Bay. And he was eventually allowed to enter the US by pretending to be the son of a man already here, one of his uncles. Men like my grandfather were known as paper sons, sons on paper only. By the time his grandchildren were born, my grandfather knew that we had to give up being Chinese in order to make it in America. One day when I was a young kid, he was cutting my hair and he stopped to tell me, I suffered when I came to this country, and I suffered for you. Get your education, he told me in his village Cantonese dialect, and do it in English. That's the only way you'll survive and succeed. When I was preparing to leave high school in 1969, I approached the representative of the University of California's Educational Opportunity Program, which at the time was focused on encouraging and aiding minority students to matriculate to higher education. Here's what the recruiter told me when I asked him about my eligibility for a minority scholarship. Well, according to our program, Chinese Americans aren't minorities, so no. Otherness once again. Some other time, I will tell you the pain that the shape of my eyes has brought me. I am a statistic. I am a member of the last generation of Chinese Americans to have heard directly from the source, our grandparents, the stories about the Exclusion Act, about Angel Island, about great suffering, misunderstanding, and racism. But I don't know that much because the indignity and fear of it all kept my grandparents from discussing it at length. Yet, as Elie Wiesel wrote, whoever listens to a witness becomes a witness. And because I am a witness, I view the current massive increase in anti-Asian hatred and violence as the expression of the continued fear of people who will not seek understanding or education, who would rather blame and attack, and who will listen to and believe those who would manipulate their fear by painting for them an easy, identifiable target, Asian Americans. The following monologue was created from my new play, White Sky, Falling Dragon, which was inspired by my father's military service in World War II. After his return home from the war, the main character in the play and his father struggle with the death of a younger son, Johnny, in the war. The intensity of the moment is heightened by the fact that the Chinese Exclusion Act was still in effect at the beginning of the war. Yet two sons from the same family volunteered to fight for the country that is banning their relatives. In this scene, the father is talking to his son after being asked what his real Chinese name is, a name kept secret by the father because of his fear of deportation. You want my Chinese name? I say, what for? Not for you to know. I come like cousin, on ship to US, study paper, study story about cousin in other China village. He dead, no come US. But his father already here, so I come like his son. Paper son, you know? Use his name, come US. Pretend I know all about other family. Study story on paper. I come. You as a man say, you go, prison island. Oh, you name. Oh, we give you name, Fred. Now go. 6 months, tiny food, 6 month Angel Island prison. Aya. Too many, no come home from war. Why army need my 2 sons for war? You say me, why 2? US no one Chinese anyway. A school, ex-school, what that? Exclusion act, hala. My pa, you see? Many years pass, he try come here, Kansan. US man send my pa prison. Prison, Angel Island. He die. No more heart. Island prison only for Chinese. US no one Chinese. Why US take 2 sons? Why 2? Johnny, he died. He too young. Long time. I leave China. I know never more see family. I here work for all our family in China. I work for Ma. I work for you. I work Johnny. All are gone. I only have picture. You see? Janaya, you number 1 son. I teach you nothing. Mongi Changlong. Wish my son, you become dragon.